Hidden in his old military trunk, the letter his mother wrote before D-Day, but never sent. The words that would have changed everything. White House Private Quarters, Washington, D.C., March 15, 1954, 7:30 p.m. President Dwight D. Eisenhower sits alone in his study, surrounded by cardboard boxes containing personal belongings transferred from his previous military quarters. After a decade of constant movement, from Allied headquarters to Columbia University to NATO's Supreme Command to the presidency, he's finally unpacking possessions that have followed him across continents and through history's most crucial moments. The evening light streams through the tall windows overlooking the south lawn, casting long shadows across papers and photographs that chronicle a lifetime of service. At 63, Eisenhower feels the weight of every year, every decision, every life lost under his command. Tonight's task should be simple: organizing personal effects, setting up his private office space, but each item he unpacks carries memories that transport him across decades of triumph and tragedy. His hands are weathered now, marked by age spots and the tremor that comes from too much coffee and too much stress. These same hands planned D-Day, signed armistice agreements, and now sign orders that could destroy civilization. But tonight, they handle fragments of a more personal history: his father's pocket watch, his West Point class ring, photographs of Kansas wheat fields from his boyhood. At the bottom of his oldest military trunk dines the same leather case that followed him through World War II. His fingers encounter an envelope he doesn't recognize. Yellowed with age, the paper feels fragile, as if it might crumble at his touch. The handwriting on the front stops his heart. "For my son Dwight, when he needs his mother's love most." The script belongs to Ida Elizabeth Stover Eisenhower, his mother, who died in 1946 while he was still Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. Her distinctive handwriting, careful, precise, formed by years of teaching Sunday school and writing letters to her 6 sons scattered across the country, brings her voice back across the years with startling clarity. Eisenhower's throat constricts with emotion he thought he'd buried with her 8 years ago. His mother, the strongest woman he ever knew, who raised 6 boys on a farm laborer's wages, who never complained about poverty or hardship, who believed absolutely in doing right regardless of personal cost. The woman whose Mennonite faith shaped his sense of duty, whose quiet strength taught him that true leadership means serving others before yourself. This is exactly when everything changed, because what his mother wrote would transform how he understood his own presidency. With trembling fingers, he breaks the seal. The envelope contains 3 pages of lined paper, covered front and back in his mother's careful handwriting. At the top, a date, June 3, 1944. 2 days before D-Day. 2 days before the invasion that made him the most famous general in the world. The letter begins simply, "My dearest Dwight, I am writing this on the eve of what everyone says will be the most important day of the war. I know you cannot tell me the details, but a mother's heart knows when her son carries the weight of the world on his shoulders." Eisenhower's eyes blur as he continues reading. His mother's words, written 30 years ago while he commanded the largest military operation in human history, speak directly to the loneliness and burden he feels tonight as President of the United States. "I see the photographs in the newspapers of you with Churchill and Roosevelt, and I am proud, but I also see something in your eyes that breaks my heart. The look of a man who carries responsibility too heavy for any one person to bear alone. I want you to know, my son, that you are not alone. Your mother's prayers follow you across every ocean, into every battle, through every impossible decision." The words hit him like a physical blow. During those dark days before D-Day, consumed with weather reports and casualty estimates, and the knowledge that his decisions would determine the fate of democracy, he felt utterly isolated. The weight of command had seemed unbearable, the responsibility inhuman, but somehow, from half a world away, his mother understood exactly what he was experiencing. "You were always the one among my boys who felt responsible for everyone else. When you were 8 years old and your brother Edgar fell through the ice, you blamed yourself for not watching him more carefully. When David scraped his knee, you carried him home on your back. When the neighbors' crops failed during the drought, you worked their fields without payment because you said it was the right thing to do. You haven't seen the most powerful part yet, because his mother's letter revealed she knew exactly what D-Day would cost him emotionally. "I know what you're planning, son. I may be a Kansas farm woman, but I can read between the lines of the newspaper stories. You're about to send hundreds of thousands of young men into battle, knowing that many will not come home. You're carrying the weight of their lives, their mother's tears, their wives' grief, and I know this burden is breaking your heart, because that's the kind of man I raised you to be." Tears stream down Eisenhower's face as he reads his mother's understanding of his deepest pain. She saw through the newspapers, through the official reports, through the public image of the confident Supreme Allied commander, to the human being underneath who agonized over every casualty, who spent sleepless nights thinking about the young men who would die because of his orders. "But I want you to understand something, Dwight. The fact that sending men to die breaks your heart doesn't make you weak. It makes you worthy of the trust they place in you. A commander who doesn't feel the weight of those lives shouldn't have the power to spend them. Your compassion is not a burden, it's your greatest qualification for leadership." The wisdom in those words staggers him. During the war, he thought his emotional response to casualties was a weakness he needed to hide from his staff, from his superiors, from the men who followed his orders. But his mother, who never commanded anything larger than Sunday school, understood leadership better than most generals. "Remember what I taught you when you were small and felt overwhelmed by helping your brothers with their problems? Dwight," I said, "when God gives you a heavy load, He also gives you strong shoulders. You have strong shoulders, my son, strong enough to carry the burden of command, strong enough to make decisions others cannot make, strong enough to live with the consequences." Wait a minute, don't miss this crucial insight, because the next paragraph reveals why she never sent this letter. "I wrote this letter to comfort you in the dark hours I know are coming, but as I hold it in my hands, ready to seal the envelope, I realize something important. You don't need your mother's permission to be strong. You already are strong. Sending this letter might make you think of home when you need to think of victory. It might make you feel my worry when you need to feel my confidence." Eisenhower understands. His mother, with her profound wisdom about human nature, recognized that her emotional support might undermine his psychological preparation for D-Day. She chose his success over her need to comfort him, his mission over her desire to ease his burden. "So I will not send this letter. Instead, I will trust that the love I poured into raising you, the values I taught you, the strength I tried to build in your character, here's all of that will sustain you when the moment comes. You carry my love with you always, whether or not you carry my words." The sacrifice implicit in that decision overwhelms him. His mother, facing the possibility that her son might die in the greatest battle of the war, chose not to send him her final expression of love because she believed it would serve him better to feel her confidence than her worry. You won't believe what she wrote next, but these words would guide his presidency for the next 4 years. "If you are reading this letter, it means something happened to me before I could decide whether to send it. Perhaps that's God's way of ensuring you receive these words exactly when you need them most, not when I wanted to send them. So let me tell you what I see in your future, my son." The prophetic quality of her words sends chills through him. Writing in 1944, she somehow anticipated the challenges he would face a decade later as president. "You will face decisions that seem impossible, problems that have no good solutions, choices where every option causes pain. In those moments, remember that leadership is not about finding perfect answers, it's about choosing the path that serves the greatest good, even when that path breaks your heart." Her words speak directly to his current presidential dilemma with nuclear weapons, with civil rights, with the Cold War tensions that threaten global peace. Every major decision he faces involves choosing between painful alternatives, accepting outcomes that cause suffering while trying to minimize that suffering as much as possible. You will be tempted to carry everyone's burdens on your shoulders, to blame yourself for tragedies you cannot prevent, to believe that if you were stronger or smarter or better, you could save everyone. But my son, leadership sometimes means accepting that you cannot save everyone. Your job is to save as many as you can, make the best choices available to you, and trust God with the rest. The practical wisdom of those words astounds him. During his presidency, he has indeed struggled with the impossibility of perfect solutions, the reality that every policy decision creates winners and losers, the tragic truth that leadership often means choosing who suffers rather than preventing all suffering. What you've seen so far was just the beginning, because the final page of his mother's letter contained guidance that would reshape his approach to the presidency. I know you're reading this at a time when you feel alone with impossible responsibilities, but you are not alone, Dwight. Every mother who ever sent a son to war stands with you. Every father who trusted you with his boy's life supports you. Every family who sacrificed for freedom believes in you. The connection to his current role as president strikes him powerfully. The mothers and fathers who voted for him, who trust him with their children's future in the nuclear age, who depend on his leadership to navigate the Cold Warfare, they are the same people his mother described, just facing different threats. And when the burden feels too heavy, when the decisions seem impossible, when you question whether you're strong enough for what God has called you to do, remember this. You are not carrying this burden because you are the strongest man alive. You are carrying it because you are the right man, the man who feels the weight of it, who understands what it costs, who will never make these decisions lightly. Eisenhower's perspective on presidential leadership shifts fundamentally as he absorbs his mother's words. He has spent his presidency feeling inadequate to the enormous responsibility, questioning whether he possesses the wisdom necessary for nuclear-age decision-making. But his mother's letter reframes that self-doubt as qualification rather than weakness. Your sensitivity to the human cost of your decisions is not a flaw to overcome. It is the very quality that makes you trustworthy with such power. Never lose that tender heart, my son. It's what separates leaders from tyrants, commanders from butchers, presidents from dictators. The final paragraph brings him to his knees emotionally. I may not live to see all that you accomplish, but I know this. Whatever challenges you face, whatever impossible choices you must make, whatever burdens you must carry, you will face them with honor. Not because you are perfect, but because you are good. Not because you have all the answers, but because you ask the right questions. Not because you feel no pain, but because you feel everyone's pain and still find the courage to act. Just when he thought the letter was ending, Eisenhower discovered a final note written in different ink, apparently added later. P.S. I have decided not to send this letter after all. But I am keeping it, in case someday you need to hear these words from your mother's heart. If you are reading this, it means that someday has come. Remember, my dearest son, a mother's love never dies. It lives on in every lesson she taught, every value she instilled, every moment of strength she helped build in your character. You carry me with you always. Your loving mother, Ida. Eisenhower sits in his presidential study, tears streaming freely down his face, understanding finally why this letter existed but was never sent. His mother had written it as an insurance policy against future despair, a source of comfort held in reserve for the darkest moments of his leadership journey. Reading it now, 10 years after her death and a decade into the nuclear age, he realizes that her timing was perfect. During the war, her words might have softened his resolve when he needed to be hard. Now facing the moral complexities of Cold War leadership, her compassionate wisdom provides exactly the guidance he needs. This time the real revelation came in how the letter changed his presidency. The next morning, Eisenhower begins making decisions differently. Instead of seeing his emotional response to difficult choices as weakness, he begins trusting it as moral guidance. When advisors recommend nuclear strikes in Indochina, his gut reaction of horror, but the same sensitivity his mother celebrated, helps him find alternatives that avoid massive civilian casualties. When facing the Little Rock integration crisis, his mother's words about feeling everyone's pain while still finding courage to act guide him toward federal intervention that protects vulnerable children while preserving constitutional principles. During the Suez Canal crisis, her teaching about choosing the path that serves the greatest good too, even when that path breaks your heart, strengthens his resolve to oppose even close allies when they threaten global peace. But most importantly, Eisenhower begins sharing his mother's wisdom with others facing impossible leadership decisions. When young senators visit the White House, overwhelmed by the complexity of nuclear-age governance, he tells them what his mother taught him about strong shoulders carrying heavy loads. When military commanders struggle with the moral weight of strategic planning, he shares her insight about leadership requiring heartbreak, not avoiding it. The letter becomes his most treasured possession, more valuable than any medal or honor. He reads it before every major decision, finding in his mother's words the emotional and moral framework for presidential leadership that no political advisor or strategic expert could provide. 6 months before leaving office, Eisenhower makes a decision that would honor his mother's memory and help future leaders. He writes a response to her letters 30 years too late, but exactly on time for his own healing. Dear Mother, I finally received your letter. You were right about everything. The burden was heavy, the decisions were impossible, and I did feel alone. But your love, your lessons, and your wisdom sustained me through every dark moment. Thank you for raising me to feel the weight of responsibility rather than flee from it. Thank you for teaching me that a tender heart is a leader's greatest strength, not his greatest weakness. I hope I made you proud. Your grateful son, Dwight. He seals this letter in his own envelope, with instructions that it be buried with him. A final conversation with the woman whose love shaped the leader who helped save the world from nuclear destruction. That's how a mother's unfinished letter became the secret foundation of presidential leadership. Not through policy briefings or strategic analysis, but through the timeless wisdom of a Kansas farm woman who understood that true strength comes from feeling the weight of responsibility, not from avoiding it. Eisenhower's presidency succeeded not despite his emotional sensitivity to the human cost of leadership, but because of it. His mother's letter gave him permission to trust his compassionate instincts, to see his heartbreak over difficult decisions as qualification for making those decisions wisely. So when you face moments that require difficult choices, when responsibility feels too heavy for your shoulders, when you question whether you're strong enough for what you've been called to do, remember what Ida Eisenhower taught her son. Your sensitivity to the weight of responsibility is not weakness, it's wisdom. Your heartbreak over the consequences of necessary decisions is not failure, it's humanity. And your willingness to carry burdens that break your heart is not foolishness, it's love. Because sometimes the greatest leaders are not those who feel no pain, but those who feel everyone's pain and still find the courage to act. Eisenhower understood this. That's why his mother's letter, written but never sent before D-Day, became the emotional foundation for a presidency that navigated the nuclear age without destroying the world. A mother's love, expressed through words held for 30 years, guided decisions that preserved peace for millions of children she would never meet. And until now, almost no one knew that the most important letter in presidential history was the one that almost never got delivered, or how a mother's wisdom from beyond the grave shaped the leadership that kept the world from nuclear war. White House Private Quarters, Washington, D.C., March 15, 1954. 7:30 p.m. President Dwight D. Eisenhower sits alone in his study, surrounded by cardboard boxes containing personal belongings transferred from his previous military quarters. After a decade of constant movement, Marcus from Allied headquarters to Columbia University to NATO Supreme Command to the presidency, he's finally unpacking possessions that have followed him across continents and through history's most crucial moments. The evening light streams through the tall windows overlooking the south lawn, casting long shadows across papers and photographs that chronicle a lifetime of service. At 63, Eisenhower feels the weight of every year, every decision, every life lost under his command. Tonight's task should be simple: organizing personal effects, setting up his private office space, but each item he unpacks carries memories that transport him across decades of triumph and tragedy. His hands are weathered now, marked by age spots and the tremor that comes from too much coffee and too much stress. These same hands planned D-Day, signed armistice agreements, and now sign orders that could destroy civilization. But tonight they handle fragments of a more personal history: his father's pocket watch, his West Point class ring, photographs of Kansas wheat fields from his boyhood. At the bottom of his oldest military trunk, the same leather case that followed him through World War II, his fingers encounter an envelope he doesn't recognize. Yellowed with age, the paper feels fragile, as if it might crumble at his touch. The handwriting on the front stops his heart. For my son Dwight, when he needs his mother's love most, The script belongs to Ida Elizabeth Stover Eisenhower, his mother, who died in 1946 while he was still Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. Her distinctive handwriting, careful, precise, formed by years of teaching Sunday school and writing letters to her 6 sons, scattered across the country, brings her voice back across the years with startling clarity. Eisenhower's throat constricts with emotion he thought he'd buried with her 8 years ago. His mother, the strongest woman he ever knew, who raised 6 boys on a farm laborer's wages, who never complained about poverty or hardship, who believed absolutely in doing right regardless of personal cost. The woman whose Mennonite faith shaped his sense of duty, whose quiet strength taught him that true leadership means serving others before yourself.